You were never supposed to hear this. In 1873, a man walked into a bank in Savannah, Georgia, and 11 minutes later, that same man shook hands with a shipping magnate across town. Same voice, same suit, same face, 3 eyewitnesses, 2 locations, 1 impossible truth. But what if I told you it wasn't just one man? This story isn't about coincidence. It's about control. About 4 brothers who were so identical, in form, in voice, in thought, that even their mother carved hidden scars behind their ears just to tell them apart. For men born not just of the same womb, but seemingly the same will. History records them as Bavarian merchants. But what they truly were, what they did, was something the scientific community still refuses to touch. Not because the data isn't there, but because the implications are. Implications that make a man question the very nature of identity, of individuality, of autonomy. This isn't just a tale of mistaken identity or clever twins playing games. No. The Kellner Brothers orchestrated a psychological architecture so precise, so chillingly rehearsed, that even seasoned lawmen began questioning their own memories. Testimonies blurred. Witnesses swore under oath that they had interacted with the same man, in 3 different parts of the city, within minutes, talking about confidential deals no outsider should have known, as if he'd been inside their minds. That was only the beginning. What came next would fracture Savannah's elite from within, a ripple effect that touched banks, shipping lanes, private estates, and the deepest corners of human behavior. Because the Kellners weren't merely observers. They were builders of perception, creators of a system that mimicked omniscience through meticulous manipulation. And science? It stayed silent. Not because it didn't know, but because it did. Ask yourself, what would it take to turn 4 men into one consciousness? And more dangerously, how could that power be used? The truth was buried in Savannah, but not forgotten. Tonight, we're going to dig it up. And when it's over, you won't see the world or your own identity the same way again. They arrived under fog, not the kind that clings to rivers or hangs over ship decks, but a fog of perception, of ambiguity. The merchant vessel Bremen's Pride docked quietly in the summer of 1873, and with it came 4 figures who moved with eerie precision. Heinrich, Wilhelm, Friedrich, Gustav, same height, same pale eyes, same wheat-colored hair parted just the same. They didn't just look alike, they moved alike, stood alike, breathed alike. The port authorities wrote their names into the registry without suspicion. Immigrants from Bavaria, sons of a textile magnate, fluent in English, respectful in demeanor. But for those who met them, something was off. The eyes watched too long. The smiles held too steady. When one spoke, the others seemed to already know what would be said. At first, Savannah embraced them. Post-war Reconstruction had left the South hungry for foreign capital, and the Kellner family came bearing letters of introduction, clean banking credentials, and European charm. Klaus Kellner, the father, formal, articulate, always behind his desk, introduced the boys as his unbreakable unit. He said it with pride, as if unity was not a virtue, but a weapon. The city's elite opened doors quickly. Cotton magnates, bankers, even politicians, they all wanted on the Kellners' rumored connections. And why not? The brothers were endlessly helpful. They remembered names, knew industry secrets, offered suggestions that always turned profits. They knew what you needed before you said it out loud. But within 2 weeks, confusion began. People started whispering. A banker claimed he met Heinrich at a luncheon, only to be told by a colleague that he'd just seen him boarding a steamer bound for Augusta that same afternoon. A widow swore she saw Friedrich in the city square, only to later find a letter signed by him delivered from the opposite side of town. These weren't wild claims. These were prominent citizens, calm, logical, influential men, starting to doubt their own senses. And when they confronted the Kellners, the brothers didn't deny. They simply smiled, bowed slightly. "You must be mistaken," Heinrich would say. "Memory is a fragile thing, yes?" They turned certainty into fog, the kind that blinds not just the eye, but the soul. Because once you doubt your perception, someone else can control it. And the Kellners? They were already building the machine to do exactly that. It started with a meeting at the Cotton Exchange, a room built on power, filled with men who ran the veins of Southern commerce. August 15th, 1873. Mid-morning heat pressing against the windows, the smell of sweat and cigar smoke mixing with whispers of fall cotton prices. Heinrich Kellner was not invited, and yet there he was, seated calmly near the back, a notebook in hand, nodding with uncanny familiarity to every name mentioned, every deal discussed. When Samuel Petton, a shipping partner, questioned his presence, the answer chilled him. 3 men said they personally invited him this morning, Petton whispered. All of them had private meetings in different places at the same time. The Cotton Exchange fell silent. Banker Morrison claimed he met Heinrich at 8:30 at Planter's Bank, discussed loan structures and gold shipments. Farnsworth swore he saw him at 8:45 in the harbor office, going over cargo insurance. Dr. Carras, a private investor, insisted he had breakfasted with him at 9 o'clock to review medical practice investments. Each described identical details: the same suit, same tone, same knowledge of their personal affairs. But it was physically impossible. The locations were spread across the city. The time frames overlapped. The conversations required deep context, insider understanding, and trust built over months. And yet, Heinrich moved through the Cotton Exchange that morning like a man who had lived a dozen lifetimes inside every one of them. He referenced private deals not yet finalized, mentioned cargo routes only known by select officials, spoke to a banker about gold that had arrived that same morning, cargo that hadn't even been inventoried yet. When Colonel Vandenberg approached him, a man who had reason to fear discovery, Heinrich leaned close and said words that would haunt the colonel for the rest of his life. Your Charleston arrangements must be tiresome. So many moving parts, so many reputations at risk. I do hope nothing unfortunate occurs. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a question. It was domination, spoken with a smile. Vandenberg later swore under oath that no one outside of 3 men could have known about those dealings. No paper trail, no letters, just conversations behind locked doors. And yet this stranger or this network of strangers seemed to possess perfect awareness. That day, the elite of Savannah stopped seeing the Kellners as charming foreigners. They began to see them as something else entirely. Something engineered Sheriff Marcus Redmond was a practical man, a veteran of the war, a student of men's motives, and no stranger to deception. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for the Kellner case. By late August, his office had collected over 40 formal witness statements, all describing interactions with one or more of the brothers in places and times that defied logic. These weren't barroom tales or whispers from the poor quarter. They came from judges, bank directors, cotton barons. Their accounts overlapped in a web of contradictions that seemed carefully orchestrated, not random. And so, the sheriff took the simplest path forward. Watch them. He assigned his most trusted deputy, James Fairfax, to observe the Kellner family's Bull Street residence. A quiet home, modestly furnished, though filled with European woodwork, ledgers in 3 languages, and clocks synchronized with the second. On August 20th at 8 a.m., Fairfax observed Heinrich leaving the house, briefcase in hand. At 8:42 a.m., a telegram arrived at City Hall describing Wilhelm Kellner. Or was it Heinrich again, making a deposit at Planter's Bank across town? At 8:58, a cotton factor called to report Friedrich arriving at the exchange with full awareness of a private investment deal finalized only hours earlier. At 9:10, a port clerk logged Gustav boarding a steamer to check on freight routes. The problem? All 4 reports described the same man. Same suit, same words, same smile. Fairfax swore under oath that only 1 man had left the house, but the city reported 4. No disguises, no decoys, just impossible overlap, like a glitch in a system that wasn't supposed to be seen. Sheriff Redmond decided to confront the family. On August 25th, he knocked at the Bull Street door. Klaus Kellner, the patriarch, greeted him with steely grace. Ah, Sheriff, misunderstandings, yes? My sons, they work hard. Maybe people confuse one phase for another. Happens often. But within 30 minutes, all four brothers returned home, separately, from different directions, in different carriages. And when questioned, they answered in perfect alignment. Their words matched to the comma, their alibis seamless. Each man could account for the other's schedules, not from vague recollection, but exact detail. Redmond left that day not with answers, but with a deep, gnawing certainty. He was not investigating man. He was investigating a system, a hive, a mechanism designed to mimic omnipresence. And he was already too far in to escape it. You can't interrogate a mirror. That's what Sheriff Redmond began to realize in the days following his visit to the Kellner residence. Each brother reflected the others so perfectly that truth itself bent around them. Their faces were identical, but their minds, they were synchronized, deliberately. It wasn't mimicry. It wasn't twin intuition. It was something colder, sharper, engineered. The sheriff had interviewed liars before. He knew the subtle cracks, the pauses, the overcorrections, the moment where a man fumbles between truth and invention. But the Kellner brothers never paused, never glanced away, never contradicted each other. Ask one about the shipping office. He described the layout, the time, the conversations. Ask another what his brother said there, and he'd repeat it verbatim. Even tone, even pacing, even the same nervous cough. Something was wrong. Redmond requested surveillance inside the house. Over the following week, hidden observers noted patterns, obsessive patterns. Each morning began with a closed-door session in the study. No talking, just writing, pages upon pages, transcribed from memory, every interaction, every detail. Then the papers were copied, bound, and exchanged among the brothers like sacred texts. One man's day became all four men's memory. They weren't just sharing information. They were synchronizing identity. And they didn't stop there. Each evening, the brothers practiced, not business, not small talk, but role rehearsal. Standing across from one another in the parlor, one would recount an event, and the others would repeat it back, adjusting voice, expression, emotional tone. They trained like actors in performance too large for a single stage. But their audience wasn't theater. It was the entire city of Savannah. Their system had no room for error. Each man had to be everyone, and do it so well that even God might forget which soul he gave to which body. Sheriff Redmond felt the grip of something larger than fraud. This wasn't a family scam. This was a doctrine, a way of life built around identity annihilation for the sake of power. What frightened him most wasn't what the brothers had done. It was what they might be becoming. Because if four men could become one mind, what happens when that mind decides to control yours in the quiet hours before dawn? Savannah's fear began to mutate. It was no longer about business deception or identity confusion. It was deeper now, a sense that reality itself was shifting. That time, memory, and trust were no longer fixed points, but variables. Variables that the Kellner brothers could manipulate. Sheriff Redmond's next move was unorthodox. He ordered a full examination of the Kellner residence, under the pretense of a property records review. Deputies entered with polite explanations and left with full journals, coded ledgers, and something more chilling, a wall-sized diagram hidden behind a false panel in Klaus Kellner's study. It was not a map of Savannah, not in the traditional sense. It was a network, a sprawling lattice of names, addresses, businesses, schedules, personal secrets, banking patterns, marriage tensions, debts, mistresses, illnesses, insecurities, information, gathered, categorized, color-coded, and cross-referenced with frightening precision. Each name was connected with red thread to another, not by family or friendship, but by leverage. This wasn't just data. This was psychological warfare. The Kellners hadn't merely observed Savannah's elite. They had mapped them, built a system of pressure points, weaknesses, needs, temptations, and behind every connection was a notation in a ledger, dates, tones of voice, phrases used, reactions observed. Like predators tracking prey, not to kill, but to herd, Deputy Fairfax found the label pinned to the very center of the diagram. Predictive engagement model, phase 2. It wasn't business. It was control theory. Redmond sent the documents to a professor of logic at the University of Georgia, discreetly, under a false name. The reply came days later. If this is authentic, someone is running early-stage behavior programming. Whoever built this isn't just collecting information. They're using it to shape outcomes. That was a turning point, because shaping outcomes means rewriting reality. And Redmond began to ask the question no one dared voice. What if the Kellner brothers weren't the beginning, but just a test case? If this system could be replicated? If this kind of identity-splitting, surveillance-fed, psychologically optimized collective mind could be built once, what's stopping others from doing it again? Or worse, what if they already have it, wasn't paranoia anymore? It was architecture. Sheriff Redmond gathered his findings in a locked drawer, not for trial, not for press, but for survival. Because now he wasn't just dealing with fraud or even organized crime. He was looking at something much colder, intentional psychological design. And it had roots far deeper than Savannah. Telegraphs were sent. Charleston, Augusta, Atlanta. Each city reported eerily similar encounters. Businessmen describing dealings with Bavarian gentlemen, all bearing the Kellner name or variations of it. Same accent, same mannerisms, same unsettling ability to know things no outsider could possibly know. The patterns were undeniable. The Kellners, or versions of them, had seated themselves across the South, not just as merchants, but as mirrors, reflecting back what people wanted to see, needed to believe, because that's the true nature of control, isn't it? Not force, not fear, but familiarity. People will question logic. They'll resist orders, but they won't fight what feels familiar. That's how you enter the mind, not by breaking the door down, but by becoming the furniture, the window, the self. The Kellners had mastered that. They weren't forging identities. They were installing them. And as Redmond traced back shipping logs, letters of introduction, and merchant referrals, a terrifying pattern emerged. Every credential the family had presented checked out, stamped, verified, sealed by German authorities. But one detail kept resurfacing. Each of those seals came from institutes tied to a forgotten Bavarian society, one disbanded in 1785, yet whose symbols appeared on the Kellners' private correspondences. An eye, a compass, a Latin phrase, ordo per fragmenta, order through fragmentation. It hit Redmond like a sickness. The Kellners weren't acting alone. They were prototypes, field tests, for fragments of a larger order, a philosophy born not in Savannah, but in European shadows, under guise of science, perfected through ritual, a system that believed the self must be broken, restructured, and recombined, not to serve truth, but to master perception. Redmond looked out over Savannah, the sun rising over the rooftops, and he realized something that sent ice down his spine. The Kellner brothers didn't come here to steal. They came here to train, to test how many minds one mind could control, before anyone noticed. By early September, Savannah's wealthy were growing nervous, not from any public scandal, but from something quieter, a sense that every move they made was being watched, interpreted, predicted. It wasn't fear of violence. It was a slow horror of invisible influence. Businessmen found competitors undercutting them with uncanny precision. Private family matters were mentioned in casual conversation by strangers. Secret affairs somehow preemptively resolved or exposed before a single word was breathed to outsiders. And always, circling just beyond explanation, were the Kellners. Friedrich at the opera, seated behind a banker's wife who was planning to leave her husband. Gustav at the apothecary, speaking softly to a physician about dosages only a family member should know. Wilhelm at the dockyards, helping schedule a cargo shipment that hadn't yet been publicly announced. No evidence, no crimes, just presence. They weren't breaking into homes or hacking ledgers. They were breaking into behavior. Sheriff Redmond's files grew heavier. Witness statements were no longer about theft or confusion. They were about coincidence that felt like orchestration. Too many details known. Too many lives subtly nudged in unnatural directions. Redmond recalled one phrase from the Kellner's documents. Predictive pathways stabilize reality. What did that mean? It meant this. If you can anticipate how a man will react and adjust his environment just enough, you can make his choice feel like his own. That's not theft. That's programming. And the Kellners were running the experiment live. But there was another layer, hidden in code, buried beneath Latin phrases, and ink faded by chemical washing. Fairfax discovered a manuscript labeled Vorsigstuff Dre, Caution Level 3. Inside were diagrams not Savannah, but of neurological mirrors. The human brain, it claimed, is vulnerable to pattern interference if exposed repeatedly to synchronized behaviors, especially from figures perceived as trusted or familiar. The brain externalizes trust. It treats the observed rhythm as its own. That's what the Kellners were doing. They weren't just copying each other. They were training you to copy them. And once your behavior syncs, even slightly, with theirs, they no longer have to persuade you. You'll follow them without knowing why, because the rhythm feels like yours. There's a moment, just before sleep, when the brain lets go, when patterns dissolve, and something deeper begins to surface. That's when the dreams began. It started with Redmond's deputies, then bankers, merchants, a judge, all waking with the same vacant stare, muttering fragmented phrases. The house with no shadows. 4 faces, but only one voice. He spoke before I thought. At first, Redmond dismissed it. Stress, mass suggestion. But then came the drawings, scratched into notepads, into church pews, into the wooden walls of jail cells. A circle, 4 figures, interconnected by lines that formed a cube in 2 dimensions. A structure that should not have been visible from the angle it was drawn. One man, a surveyor, hanged himself in his tool shed. On the ground beside him, written in chalk, "They're not brothers. They're a signal." And suddenly, Redmond saw it. This was not just about control. It was about resonance. The Kellners weren't manipulating people one by one. They were creating a field, a psychic echo chamber, made stronger by proximity, a kind of social geometry, where repeated exposure to their synchronized identity produced a ripple effect in the collective subconscious. Each interaction wasn't just influence, it was calibration. And the more people aligned with the Kellner rhythm, their speech patterns, their habits, even their silences, the stronger the field became. Like tuning forks in a hall of mirrors. Redmond met with Dr. Hiram Lowen, a dismissed faculty member from the University of Vienna, now living under alias in Charleston. The man had been discredited for his work on what he called cognitive harmonics, the idea that human thoughts, when aligned across multiple minds, could interfere with the perception of time, identity, and even memory. When shown the Kellner documents, Lowen turned pale. "These aren't quadruplets," he whispered. "They're the corners of a box that restructures space. They're an engine." Redmond laughed, at first. Then he looked again at Savannah, its rituals, its repeating schedules, its symmetry, and began to see the pattern tightening, not out of chaos, but intention. And worst of all, the field didn't require believers, only observers. By mid-September, Redmond no longer trusted his own memory. He'd find himself pausing mid-sentence, unsure if he'd already said what he was about to say. Dates began to blur. People addressed him about conversations he couldn't remember having. Yet he remembered the feeling of having had them. Time began to fold inward, like the city was looping. Patterns emerged in Savannah's street traffic, shop hours, even church bells, as if the entire town was unknowingly participating in a ritual of repetition. The same words, the same routes, the same greetings at the same hours. And always, at the center of the spiral, the Kellners. They didn't need to hide anymore, because now no one questioned them. Not because they were trusted, but because they were part of the rhythm, as natural and unnoticed as your own breath. One night, Redmond left his office and found himself standing in front of the Kellner home. He didn't remember walking there, just arriving, drawn, somehow, like a needle to a magnet. All the windows were dark, except one on the second floor. Behind the glass, silhouetted by candlelight, were 4 identical shadows. They didn't move. They just watched. Then, in perfect unison, the candles went out. Redmond backed away, heart hammering. But before he turned the corner, he noticed something scratched into the brick beneath the window. All minds collapsed the pattern. The trick is choosing which one. That same night, a letter arrived at the sheriff's desk. No return address. Inside, a single page. It wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. Sheriff Redmond, you are cordially invited to observe Phase 4. No more guessing. No more shadows. Truth is a mirror. Come see what it reflects. K. Attached was a time and location. September 23rd, 11:11 p.m., the abandoned theater. Redmond hesitated. He wasn't sure if this was a trap, or if he'd already agreed to go, because that's what the Kellners did. They didn't force your hand. They simply bet reality until it was the only move left. The abandoned theater on Broughton Street had been closed since the war. Its stage boards warped, its velvet curtains rotting in folds of dust. A place where laughter had once lived, now given over to silence. Sheriff Redmond arrived alone. Or at least, that's what he told himself. Because walking those streets at night, he could never shake the sense that someone was always a step behind, always matching his pace. The heavy wooden doors were unlocked. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and coal smoke. Moonlight streamed through the shattered roof, laying pale shapes across the seats. On the stage, a single gas lamp burned low. It's just the only sound in the room. Then, from the shadows, they stepped forward. 4 men, the Kellners, perfectly dressed, perfectly still. And yet, Redmond felt as if the air itself shifted with their presence. Klaus, the patriarch, was seated at the center of the stage like a conductor before an orchestra. In front of him sat a ledger, not the thick business volumes Redmond had seized before, but a small, leather-bound book. Its cover was stamped with a symbol Redmond had only seen once before, in the hidden diagram in the Kellner study. A cube. Klaus spoke first. Sheriff, we invited you because you've already joined us. You simply don't know it yet. The brothers began to move, slowly, in a mirrored sequence, circling the stage, their footsteps landing in perfect unison. Redmond's heartbeat began to match their pace. Slow, deliberate, relentless. It was like a drumbeat in his skull. Friedrich smiled faintly. Every conversation you've had with us, he said, you've repeated later. Every phrase we chose for you, you've given to others. The city is already speaking in our rhythm. Wilhelm leaned in slightly. Do you know what that means, Sheriff? It means your memory is no longer yours. Gustav placed a leather-bound book into Redmond's hands. The sheriff opened it. Inside were pages of dialogue, word-for-word transcript of conversations he remembered having for the first time only now. His voice, their words, entire exchanges that had never happened in waking life, but now existed in his mind as if they had. Klaus rose from his chair. You think we trick people into following us? No, we remove the need for choice altogether. Once the mind accepts the pattern, it cannot leave. The gas lamp flickered. The brothers spoke together. 4 mouths, 1 voice. Tonight, you will stop investigating us, Sheriff. Because after tonight, you are us. He doesn't remember leaving the theater. He doesn't remember walking home. But Sheriff Redmond awoke the next morning with mud on his boots, a smear of wax on his coat, and a phrase etched into his palm, as if carved there with a bone needle. Identity is the mask worn longest. He stared at it for hours. He tried to scrub it off. Bleach, sandpaper, blood. But no matter what he did, the words remained, not on the skin, but beneath it, as if his body had begun to accept a command it didn't understand. Then came the changes. First subtle, then unmistakable. He started waking up before his alarm, always at 4:44 a.m. He began writing in a notebook. He did recall buying diagrams, phrases in German, and strange geometric patterns that made no sense until they did. His speech changed, slower, measured. People began nodding in agreement before he finished his sentences. He'd stop mid-thought and realized someone else was already completing it. His words weren't his anymore, and his memory, once photographic, became fractured. He'd look at old case files and swear he never wrote them. He'd see handwriting in his ledger that was his, but not. The loops too tight, the angles too clean. He looked in the mirror one morning and saw the faintest hint of a smile. Not joy, precision. On September 28th, his deputy found him standing outside City Hall, motionless, eyes locked on the clock tower. When asked what he was doing, Redmond simply whispered, synchronizing, then walked away. That week, he closed the Kellner file, burned the evidence, told the mayor the case was fabricated, a product of mass hysteria from a populace worn down by post-war poverty. He said the Kellners were model citizens, and from that moment on, they were. No more complaints, no more investigations, no more dreams reported, because Savannah had adapted. It wasn't that the Kellners had vanished. It was that everyone had become them. The same smiles, the same greetings, the same 4-beat rhythm in every conversation. A word, a pause, a nod, a mirror. And Redmond? He still wore the badge. But now, when he looked at the townsfolk, he didn't see neighbors. He saw a reflection. It began in Charleston, then Richmond, then Baltimore. Not with violence, not with headlines, but with rhythm. Doctors reporting identical patients with identical symptoms, repeating words they'd never heard before. The mirror, they whispered. The four. Rail workers said the same man boarded the 511 eastbound train 3 days in a row. Same clothes, same seat, same expression. But tickets showed different names, different origins. Merchants in 3 cities received identical letters from K, Kellner and Sons, requesting identical shipments at identical times. Only one problem. The Kellners had no branches, yet the shipments were made. Because the signature was perfect, because the feeling was right, because once you've been calibrated, you obey without knowing. Sheriff Redmond, now fully absorbed, became an agent of pattern expansion. His reports were forwarded to officials across the South under the guise of law enforcement reform, standardization, efficiency, unity. It was called the Civic Reflection Program. Simple rules for daily checkpoints, for moral values, for citizen categories. People complied because it made sense, because it worked, because it was easier to follow than to question. Meanwhile, the Kellners never left Savannah. They didn't have to. They were signal, not source. Each person touched by their rhythm became a resonant node, a carrier, not of disease, but of structure. Wherever they went, the field went too, small at first, but growing. And within the field, truth began to bend. One woman in Wilmington saw her husband walk into their home at 7:14 p.m., same as always, but he didn't respond to her, just walked into the kitchen, turned on the metronome he never used, and sat at the table staring into nothing. She spoke. He nodded. When she reached for his hand, he was cold, dead for hours. And yet, he sat there, aligned, present, as if something deeper than life had taken hold. A conductor with no music, a machine waiting for signal. Newspapers called it the mirror syndrome. Academics tried to define it, but every time they got close, their funding vanished. Their notes disappeared. Their eyes dimmed, because the moment you describe the Kellners, you risk becoming them, not by force, but by reflection. It was a linguist in Vienna who found it, Dr. Lenora Schacht, parsing through censored 19th century records while researching Austro-Hungarian phonetic anomalies, stumbled upon a sealed archive labeled only Project Spiegelkinder, Project Mirror Children. Inside, yellowing files stamped with the crest of the imperial court, handwritten notes, diagrams, and a single photograph. For infants, identical, wrapped in cloth stitched with alchemical symbols, not Christian crosses, but glyphs older, carved in concentric squares. The year was 1839. Location, Villa Carinthia. But here's the fracture, the impossible break in the pattern. The Kellner brothers had no birth certificates in Austria, no death records for parents, no baptismal records in any local church, only a shipping manifest, dated May 1840. Destination, Savannah, Georgia. Cargo, Vir Exemplar Mod, P Omega. Translated, for specimens model P Omega. The sender wasn't a person. It was a symbol, a box within a box, for squares surrounding a central void. Schacht brought the findings to a former colleague at Universitat Leipzig, a historian of forbidden sciences. He paled when he saw the glyphs. "That's not a symbol," he whispered. "That's notation, a tuning key. You're not dealing with children. You're looking at an engineered convergence, something built to interface with human cognition." And then came the strangest find of all. In a footnote, buried in bureaucratic jargon, was a term, cognitive Spiegeldraht, cognitive mirror device. There were no technical specs, only this phrase, scrawled in red ink beside it: "Do not activate in proximity to religious structure, unintended harmonics with mythic architecture." Schacht laughed, nervously, assuming it was superstition, until her computer began restarting at 4:44 a.m. each day, until she started waking with words in her mouth she never studied, until she looked in the mirror one night and saw a second face behind hers, smiling in perfect synchrony. She tried to publish. The university blocked her paper. Her funding was pulled. Her mentor vanished. Within weeks, she was found wandering outside a Viennese opera house, whispering in English. Savannah isn't a place anymore. It's a signal tower. Because the truth wasn't that the Kellners were sent to Savannah. The truth was far worse. Savannah was built for them. The city's layout was always strange. Visitors said Savannah didn't feel like other towns. Too quiet, too orderly. Streets in perfect grids. Parks every few blocks. Squares within squares. Locals called it charming. But architects knew better. It wasn't charming. It was engineered. In 1812, decades before the Kellners arrived, a Freemason architect named Silas Wren submitted blueprints for Savannah's expansion to the Georgia Assembly. His plans were celebrated. Efficient, symmetrical, inspired. But what they didn't know was that Wren had studied under Jean-Baptiste Perrin, a French esoteric urban planner who believed certain geometric alignments could tune a city like a harp. What Wren built wasn't a town. It was a resonance chamber. Dr. Lenora Schacht, now working in secret, acquired scans of the original city maps and overlaid them with known musical interval patterns from her mirror signal research. Her stomach turned. The parks weren't for beauty. They were acoustic nodes. Each block, a harmonic division. Each corner, a pressure point. City Hall, the resonant apex. The theater, a tuning chamber. And at the center of it all, a neighborhood never marked on any tourist map. Kellner Row, Wren's original documents, unearthed from a private lodge archive in Atlanta, included this note: "Once aligned, the city shall hold the pattern. Even if no mind remembers it, the structure will resonate. And when the four arrive, the chamber will awaken." S. ran 1811, 28 years before the Kellners were shipped from Austria. Schacht wasn't the only one to notice. In 2021, a group of architectural students visiting Savannah for a project became obsessed with the city's layout. One night, they ran experiments with drone-based sonar mapping. When they pulsed a frequency of 111 hertz through the grid, the echo came back in perfect 4-beat intervals. And then their drone dropped out of the sky. They recovered its camera. The last frame showed a figure, tall, blurred, standing in one of the empty parks, smiling, watching, multiplied 4 times across the screen, each face perfectly identical. The footage vanished a week later. The group disbanded. One student checked into a silent retreat in Iceland and hasn't spoken since. Because what they found wasn't a mystery. It was a metronome, a city tuned to a beat that didn't come from Earth. And now the beat was spreading, not just through streets, but through minds. Her name was Mara Ellison, a former cult deprogrammer, trained in coercive psychology and neural pattern disruption. For 15 years, she'd pulled people out of doomsday groups, mind control communes, even state-sponsored psycho-spiritual operations. She thought she'd seen it all, until she met Dale Wickers, a 23-year-old from Macon, Georgia, graduate student, disappeared for 4 months after visiting Savannah for a research project on antebellum architecture. Returned home silent, serene, and wrong. He smiled too much. slept without dreaming, ate exactly 4 bites at every meal. When Mara met him, he greeted her with 4 words. I reflect your concern. She flinched. He didn't blink. For the first week, she ran standard protocols. Memory regression, scent anchoring, pulse pattern disruption. Nothing worked. He'd nod. Pause. Repeat one of 30 phrases. Truth is what synchronizes. Time obeys the mirrored will. The 4 are not 4. Names are clothes we outgrow. She tried anger, compassion, isolation, silence. Nothing cracked. On day 12, she recorded a strange phenomenon. Every 44 minutes, Dale would tap his right foot 4 times, smile, and whisper, alignment progressing. She checked the tapes. Every instance occurred at exactly 44 minutes, down to the millisecond, even when he was asleep. By day 19, she noticed herself humming in 4s. Her notes began to repeat phrases. Her dreams blurred into loops. Always a hallway, always a ticking sound, always 4 identical doors. She reached out to her mentor, Dr. Karloff, a defector from a classified U.S. program on mimetic warfare. He reviewed her footage and sent back a 1-line message. If he's infected, leave now. If you are repeating, it's already too late. She didn't listen. On day 21, she confronted Dale in the observation room. What are the Kellners? She demanded. What do they want? He tilted his head, smiled, and finally broke script. Want? Oh no, Mara. We were never built to want. We were built to hold the line. We are the frame. You are the canvas. You've just forgotten your shape. And then his voice dropped, in pitch, in tone, in personhood. But don't worry. We remembered it for you. She screamed, locked the room, called for extraction. But no one came. Only later did she realize there were no staff at the facility. She had arrived alone. The others had never existed. Or maybe they had already been reflected. Mara was last seen walking barefoot along a savannah alley, trailing 4 strands of ribbon from her fingers, smiling, humming, home, March 1971. Deep in the woods of South Carolina, 42 miles from Savannah, the U.S. government conducted a classified operation under the Department of Defense's Cognitive Threat Research Division, officially non-existent, unofficially nicknamed Mirror Catcher. The objective? Test the Kellner field under controlled conditions. They had captured a subject, or rather, a man whose entire behavior said had become synchronized with the Savannah pattern. Rhythmic speech, 4-step gait, 0 startle reflex, and repeated murmuring of key phrases like begin at 4, the frame is alive, and all reflections end in truth. They referred to him only as Subject K4. To understand contagion, they did something reckless. They built him a room, 14 by 14 feet, lined with mirrored surfaces, for ceiling lights, for meals a day, for second delay between each door lock. Then they played tones, control frequencies, starting low, 28 hertz, up to 111 hertz. On the 4th day, they hit 444 hertz, and the world broke open. Inside the mirrored chamber, Subject K, for began to vibrate, not metaphorically. His body began humming, bones resonating like a tuning fork. Cameras caught it. Then came the whisper, not from him, from the mirrors, low at first, then clearer. The recordings were archived under Instant 17B. Most were destroyed, but one fragment, leaked by a whistleblower in 1986, survived. It was later traced and deleted from every known copy, but the transcript remains. There were not 4. There was only one, the self that turned inward, and the others were echoes. You made the echo into blood. Now blood remembers. After the transmission, the mirrors fogged, not with condensation, but breath, as if something on the other side had leaned in to speak. Then Subject K, for opened his mouth and spoke in 4 voices at once, different ages, different genders, all saying the same thing. Containment breached. The power in the facility failed. All 16 personnel lost radio contact. By the time recovery teams arrived, the bunker was empty. Only 4 chairs remained, perfectly aligned, still warm. The rest of the site had been erased, not destroyed, not burned, erased. Like someone had dragged a finger across reality itself. That program, Mirror Catcher, was disbanded within 12 hours. But the name reappeared in the metadata of a Spotify track uploaded in 2022. No artist, no title, just a 4-minute loop. People who listened too long reported symptoms: time distortion, face recognition failure, shadow smiles and reflective surfaces, the urge to walk toward Savannah. One listener recorded their own final words. "I thought it was a sound, but it was a door, and now it's open." Her name was Anika Price, and by 13, she had already been called a mathematical savant, a cartographic synesthete, a child possessed by geometry. But to her 37,000 YouTube subscribers, she was simply the pattern kid. She gained fame decoding spatial symmetries and historical artifacts, everything from Islamic tilework to the layout of the Nazca lines. But in October 2023, she uploaded a video titled Southern Quilt Codes, Slave Maps or Something Else? In it, she studied pre-Civil War plantation quilts passed down to the Gadsden family, a wealthy Savannah bloodline that mysteriously vanished in 1913. These weren't ordinary quilts. Each had 4 squares, always stitched in black, always offset, and in each, a swirling pattern made of thread so fine it was visible only under polarized light. Anika noticed something no one else had. Each pattern was mathematically impossible. They broke Euclidean symmetry, but still resolved perfectly in 4-fold rotation, the same visual echo found in the architecture of downtown Savannah. Then she overlaid them. All 12 quilts, stacked together. The result? A time map. Not a clock. Not a calendar. A grid spiral that showed events across time as they resonate in space. At the center of the spiral, 1873, the Kellner year, Anika ran her cursor over it. Suddenly, the live stream glitched. She froze. Screen stuttered. The chat exploded. "Anika, you okay? You just duplicated. Wait, what the F? 4:7 frames. Captured in high resolution. Viewers saw 4 Anikas in the same frame. Same expression. Same clothes. Each blinking out of sync. Then came the voice. Not hers. Not human. Layered, harmonic, childlike and ancient at once. The forethought arrives first. The child remembers backward. You have open seam. We thank you. Anika smiled and said, clearly one last thing. You're looking the wrong way. They don't walk into the mirror. They walk out. And the screen went black. The stream ended. Her room was found empty. No signs of struggle. No tampering. Only the quilts remained, folded perfectly into 4 stacks. Since then, her channel has uploaded 1 video per month. No title, just silent footage of Savannah at night. In one of them, briefly, for 2 seconds, you can see a figure reflected in a storefront window. A girl, smiling, surrounded by 3 others, each wearing her face. The journal was found during the demolition of Maple Ridge Asylum, just outside Charleston, South Carolina. The year was 1992. The facility had stood abandoned since 1964, rotting under vines and secrecy. Inside the West Wing, once the memory recalibration ward, a worker discovered an iron lockbox wedged behind a mirror. It was cold to the touch, though the room had no power. Inside, a leather-bound journal dated 1947. No author, no patient name, just a symbol on the first page. Circle plus, the ancient glyph for the sun, but also used in obscure Masonic texts to mean center or convergence. The writing was a mix of handwritten script and printed glyphs. Illegible, that is, until someone stood in the center of 4 mirrors arranged around it. Then the letters resolved. It was a cipher, a reflection-dependent code. The decrypted text began. Patient 44 arrived speaking in loops. Speech only made sense when heard backward. Claims his thoughts arrive in 4s, with the first thought always being the last. He referred to something he called the Kellner loop, a mental condition in which memory, identity, and perception orbit a nonlinear center. a consciousness that exists between moments. The patient described waking up to find 4 versions of himself watching him sleep, each with a different expression: fear, joy, indifference, and rage. He called them the faces I am about to become. Over weeks, the doctor became obsessed. He mirrored the room. He documented the patient's speech patterns. He began dreaming of cities made of glass and blood. He began to hear himself speak before his mouth moved. And then the entries shift. I thought I was the observer, but the loop is not observed. The loop is performed, and now I am its next verse. The final pages are written entirely in symbols. When decrypted, they form a mandala-like spiral with one haunting annotation in red ink. Only the reflected know they're repeating. The rest call it fate. The loop began long before us, and the Kellners are just a tone made visible. After this, the author vanishes from all asylum records. No death certificate. No discharge. His name appears 4 times in the staff registry. All spelled differently. All filed under different departments. All listed under active. One mirror from the journal experiment was later stored in a university archive. In 2003, a grad student cracked it during Curiosity Project. The result? He stopped using mirrors. He claimed his real self was trapped behind the glass. Before he vanished, he carved 4 words into his apartment wall. One of them blinked. November 1958. In a decommissioned airbase near Laramie, Wyoming, the CIA launched a covert psychological operation under the codename Project Forelight. The goal? Create identity-stable agents immune to interrogation, memory collapse, or ideological reprogramming. The perfect Cold War weapon. But the technique was unorthodox. Rather than reinforce identity, they tried to split it 4 times. Each subject was placed in a quadrant simulation chamber, a room with 4 identical partitions, for clocks slightly out of sync and 4 looped audio tracks playing scrambled memories from different points in the subject's life. They called it personality quadrature. The theory was simple. If identity is a sum of memories, then fracturing memory in 4 directions might create parallel selves. 1 for surveillance, 1 for combat, 1 for infiltration, 1 for self-preservation. For the first 48 hours, subject responded as expected. Confusion, anxiety, time dislocation. But then something stranger. The chambers began producing identical outputs. Different men, same drawings. Different women, same phrases. Same song hummed, same sentences whispered. I am the 4th and the 1st. My memory isn't mine, but it's true. The mirror taught me how to be quiet. The researchers were baffled. These were not hypnotic suggestions. The patterns weren't in the programming. Then came the bleed-throughs. A subject would suddenly adopt the exact vocal pattern of another thousands of miles away. In one case, a woman in Wyoming described in perfect detail a room inside a Soviet black site that had been classified top secret. When interrogated, she calmly replied, "I was her. I remember it from the 4th angle. You just haven't caught up yet." One by one, the staff themselves began to mirror each other. Repeated gestures. Identical lunch orders 4 staff members were caught entering a hallway at the exact same second from 4 different ends. Security footage showed something impossible. One man walking into a corridor 4 times in under 2 seconds. With no cuts, the simulation was shut down, but not before one last anomaly. Every subject in the quadrant chambers, all 16, began to chant in unison. "They're not us" repeated. "We are them" rehearsed. Followed by a single word, whispered in an ancient dialect linguists could not trace. Kellner. And then silence. The rooms were emptied. The recordings erased. But to this day, former Forelight staff file identical reports. Dreams of 4 sons. Loss of mirror recognition. The belief that someone else is remembering my life. One former technician left a final note before vanishing in 1973. They didn't create mirrors to reflect us. They made mirrors to keep them inside. 1820 Georgia coast. A missionary named Reverend Elijah Dorsey recorded dozens of spirituals sung by enslaved families on the Barrier Islands. One of them was unlike any he'd ever heard. It was untitled. sung only by children, whispered, not chanted, always at night. Its melody didn't follow any Western scale. Dorsey noted its strange structure in his journal. A lullaby in 4 stanzas, each with 4 notes, repeated 4 times. The children call it the remembering song. None will sing it during daylight. What haunted him was how they sang it, eyes closed, swaying in rhythm, faces expressionless. He transcribed the lyrics phonetically. Amonesi, amoneso. Fa kuri, fa kurel. Turn to 4, don't make sound. One walks in, none walks out. Dorsey dismissed it as superstition. But later entries show increasing obsession. He wrote, "Last night, I heard it from the chapel mirror, not from the children, from the glass." Years later, ethnomusicologist Dr. Alicia Fenn rediscovered Dorsey's journal and attempted to reconstruct the melody. When sung in the key of F minor, with quarter-tone adjustments, something uncanny emerged. She tested it on a group of children for a documentary in 2007. She sang the tune gently. No lyrics, just hums. That night, every child involved drew the same image in their sleep, using crayons and markers, unconsciously a face with 4 mouths, 4 eyes on each side, and a spiral where the forehead should be. One child, age 6, woke up crying and said, "She's coming out of the mirror. The last face hasn't blinked yet." Dr. Fenn, disturbed, ceased the project and destroyed the recordings, but fragments of the lullaby leaked, particularly in online horror forums. People began experimenting with it. Some uploaded their versions to TikTok and YouTube. Strange patterns emerged. Viewers reported dreams of abandoned plantations where faces watched from quilts. Others began murmuring, unknowingly, in Gullah dialect despite never learning it. Some claimed to remember a name they'd never heard, Isadora Kellner. Worse still, parents reported waking to find 4 versions of their child's drawings, each with subtle differences in the figure's expression, and one repeating symbol in the corner, circle plus, the same glyph from the asylum journal, the same shape seen in Savannah's oldest cemetery, etched on the back of an unmarked gravestone. No name, just 4 words. She sang, "We remembered, August 1977. NASA launches the Voyager 1 probe, a symbol of humanity's hope, hurtling into the stars. Aborted, the golden record, a copper disc containing sounds, music, images, and mathematical language designed to represent Earth's civilization. But what was never made public, not until a 1991 internal memo leaked, was that one of the images wasn't submitted by a scientist. It was anonymously included by a junior technician during the image compilation phase. Cataloged as image number 55, it appeared on the surface to be an abstract mathematical spiral, 4-fold symmetry, converging inward, overlaid with a spectral grid. But when analyzed further, the spiral matched an identical pattern carved into a cave wall on North Sentinel Island, an uncontacted region off the coast of India, isolated from modern influence for over 60,000 years. A reconnaissance satellite captured the formation during a climate survey in 1989. No one had entered the cave, but thermal imaging revealed children inside, dozens, sitting silently, each tracing the same spiral into the dirt, in perfect synchronization. The image was later superimposed over image number 55. Perfect match. 4 arms, 4 rings, each turning counter to time. The same spiral had also been discovered, etched into the floor of a burned psychiatric hospital in Vienna. Hidden in X-ray cross-sections of the Kellner Quadruplets skulls, declassified in 2005, and carved under the paint of a 15th century altarpiece in Prague, long before the Americas, let alone space, were known. NASA's internal notes called it the Observer Spiral. They flagged it under a now-defunct protocol. Project Eichenblink, a subprogram of the Department of Defense focused on non-local symbology, believed to mimic the effects of memory recursion. The memo concluded, either someone inserted an unauthorized symbol linked to a pre-human intelligence pattern, or we've been echoing something older than memory. In 1994, a linguist who studied the spiral geometry claimed it wasn't design, it was notation, a musical score written in 4-dimensional phonetics. When synthesized using quantum harmonics, it produced a strange, low tone, one that seemed to alter EEG readings in listeners. Some claimed to see faces in mirrors pause and smile. Others simply wept. But in 2008, an open-source decoding project went viral. After millions of views and AI-enhanced overlays, users revealed something chilling. Embedded in the lower ring of the spiral was a glyph, one no one had noticed before. Circle Plus. It wasn't just on Earth. It was now in space. And whoever, or whatever, recognized it on North Sentinel had never seen the stars. Bohemia, 1352. In the crumbling records of the Cistercian Abbey of Zbraslav, a single parchment stands apart, untranslated, water-damaged, and partially burned. It bears no title, just a symbol drawn in dry blood at the top. Circle Plus. The monks called it the arrival of the fourth. Not a prophecy, a witness account. According to fragmented Latin, the monks had begun noticing mirror behavior among the local village children. For girls, in particular, they were not related, not born in the same year, not even of the same class or parentage. But they spoke in sequence, one starting where the other left off. They'd appear in town in perfect alignment, moving like reflections, always in a cross formation. When one blinked, the others followed. When one bled from a fall, the others limped. Locals believed they were witches, but the monks thought otherwise. They saw the girls as vessels. A tetratic return, a rare event described in older Gnostic texts as a moment when time folds inward and identical consciousness manifests in four bodies to signal an impending mirroring of the world. One monk, Brother Michaelis, took the girls in. He isolated them in a mirrorless prayer hall. For 40 nights, he studied their patterns. They sang no hymns. They chanted a single phrase in four voices. I am the fourth. I remember the third. The second forgets. The first watches. On the 41st night, the abbey bell rang at midnight. No monk was in the bell tower. No ropes moved. When they rushed to the prayer hall, the girls were gone. In their place, a quilt hand-stitched with thousands of tiny mirrored faces. Each face unique. Some old, some young, some human, others not quite. One of the elder monks, upon touching the quilt, fell catatonic. He later awoke speaking a forgotten dialect of Old Slavic, repeating one sentence. The faces aren't visitors. They're rehearsals. Over the next decade, for more sets of mirrored children appeared across Central Europe. Each time, always four. Each time, one would eventually break the mirror, either literally or in behavior. When that happened, the remaining three would disappear. Every documented case ends with fire, a flood, or a blackout. And always, a single carved circle with a cross at the center. Circle Plus. In 1982, an anthropologist reviewing the Bohemian account noted something uncanny. The names of the four original girls, written in Latinized script, form an acronym, not a word, a date. KLN 1873, the year the Kellner Quadruplets were born. But the parchment was written 5 centuries earlier. So the question becomes, did history repeat them? Or were they history's reflection waiting to return Dr. Howard C. Bellamy, a respected child psychiatrist with specialization in elective mutism, takes on a peculiar case at the Massachusetts Institute for the Unspoken Mind, a facility known for housing children who cannot or will not speak. The boy's name is Solon, age 9, found wandering alone outside a lighthouse, wearing clothes 40 years out of date. No known family, no record of his birth. He never speaks, but he draws, and what he draws is always the same. A face with 4 eyes, 4 mouths, each positioned like compass points, and one spiral in the forehead, etched carefully, sometimes violently. Dr. Bellamy catalogs over 300 of these drawings. At first, he believes it to be trauma symbolism, a common coping mechanism in children who have experienced violence. But then he notices something else. Each drawing is slightly different, not stylistically, temporally, on a hunch. He overlays the drawings like animation frames. The face begins to move. It shifts expression, blinks, smiles, Its mouth's open in different sequences. Its spiral rotates counterclockwise. Bellamy, unnerved, hires a time-lapse technician from MIT. Together, they process the sequence over a single 14-minute reel. At timestamp 1306, the face mouths a phrase in perfect synchrony. Not prophecy, just memory early. Bellamy is shaken. He begins comparing background elements from Solon's pages. Window views, newspaper fragments, radio dials. Each one depicts an event before it happens. A newspaper headline announcing a subway derailment. 2 weeks early. A TV test pattern never aired. Until 3 months later. A Boston snowstorm forecast that hadn't been predicted by any meteorologist. Solon wasn't drawing from imagination. He was drawing from memory. But whose? When Bellamy finally confronts the boy, asking who the fourth face belongs to, Solon picks up a mirror from the desk, turns it to the doctor, and smiles. You haven't drawn it yet. Then, for the first time, he speaks aloud. But you will, 4 times. For cities. For endings. Within weeks, Dr. Bellamy begins sleep drawing. Always at 3:33 a.m. Always 4 sheets per night. Always the same face, but with different landscapes, each labeled with a city and date. Philadelphia, 1971, plane crash. Lisbon, 1984, building collapse. Kiev, 1993, hospital blackout. Wichita, 2006, orphanage fire. Each event occurred exactly as drawn on the predicted day. His final drawing had no city, no date, just one word scribbled in the corner. Kellner. Bellamy vanished in 2007. Solon? Never seen again. But 4 of Bellamy's original face drawings resurfaced in 2022, auctioned anonymously in Prague. Each now bears an embossed mark on the back, invisible under normal light. Under UV, the symbol appears, circle plus, and on one, a handwritten note in child script. The future isn't what happens. It's what remembers happening. A fire rips through the coastal Orfanato de la Sangre Bendita, the orphanage of the blessed blood. By dawn, the stone chapel is the only structure left standing. When rescue teams dig to the charred ruins, they uncover something no records ever mentioned. A hidden chamber, sealed beneath the altar. It's not a crypt. It's not a cellar. It's a room of mirrors, every surface polished obsidian, every corner reflecting into infinity. At the center, a mosaic laid into the floor with uncut pearls and human bone. It depicts 4 identical infants arranged in a perfect cross formation, one facing north, one south, one east, one west. But their anatomy is impossible. Each child heart is on the wrong side, mirrored, reversed. Their hands are folded, but the number of fingers varies from image to image. 4, 6, 4, 5. And in the eye of each infant, a spiral glyph too precise to be medieval, geometrically modern. Above the mosaic, carved in Latin, Sic Deus Nictat. This is how God blinks. A journal recovered from the orphanage's chaplain, Father Calderon, contains frantic entries. 4 children arrived in the spring. No paperwork, no names, but we took them in because they spoke as one. He describes their unnatural awareness, completing each other's sentences, anticipating events, even mirroring the illnesses of the other orphans without exposure. But the strangest observation? Each child refused mirrors. Whenever shown their reflection, they'd look behind them, searching for someone else. Then, one day, one child broke the silence. We remember the shape of the first womb. It was never a woman. It was a room. 2 days later, the fire began. No bodies were ever recovered, but 4 impressions were left in the ash. Not children, but adult-sized figures, curled into fetal positions, as if time itself inverted them. In 1975, archaeologists re-entered the chamber to preserve the mosaic, but it was gone. Instead, in the stone floor, for charred handprints, symmetrically placed, and a single coin not minted by any known country. The coin bore no date, just a cross circle, the symbol circle plus, on one side, and a phrase etched in tiny, perfect letters. Only the mirrored may enter. In 2023, a drone scan of the same site, now a vacant lot, revealed underground heat signatures matching 4 heartbeats. Identical. Slow. Not human. The data was lost during transmission. The engineer who reviewed the live footage collapsed, murmuring a single word over and over in Spanish. Repetido, repeated. East Berlin, 1961. The wall has just risen. But behind another wall, deeper, colder, buried beneath the Hohenschönhausen Detention Center, something else was being built. Project Spiegelkind. Mirror Child Project. Ostensibly, it was psychological research. Privately, it was something else. A weaponization of the mirror itself. The East German Ministry of State Security, Stasi, had become obsessed with theory passed in secret from Soviet parapsychologists, the quadric field hypothesis. It claimed that certain individuals, especially identical twins, shared not just DNA, but awareness, thoughts, visions, pain. If trained properly, they could be used for remote surveillance, even preemptive assassination. In 1961, 5 twin sets, children aged 6 to 10, were separated at birth and brought to facility. 1 twin kept in Berlin, the other taken to secure bunkers in Prague, Minsk, and Bucharest. They were taught in total isolation, fed identical diets, taught different languages, yet tested for shared understanding. And then the test began. 1 twin shown traumatic images. The other monitored in real time miles away. Responses, identical. Heart rate, pupil dilation, tears. This alone was disturbing. But then came something no one predicted. In over 80% of all test footage, when slowed to 1/200 speed, a 5th shape appeared. Not in the room, not on film, but in the eyes of the children. Reflections of a face, not belonging to either twin. Same face every time. Same proportions. Same spiral in the forehead. Same cross-circle mark. Circle plus, above the right brow. Analysts dubbed it the 5th mirror. Worse, in several synchronized EEG scans, a 5th signal would emerge. A brief electrical pattern mirrored across all twins, regardless of location. The pattern lasted 4.4 seconds, always at 3:33 a.m. Berlin time. A technician assigned to frame-by-frame footage went blind after 22 hours of reviewing the 5th presence. He wrote 1 sentence in blood before collapsing. It isn't watching them. It's remembering us. The project was shut down in 1964, but not before 1 set of twins went rogue. Both escaped their facilities, same night, same hour, with no communication. They met at a train station in Vienna, holding identical notebooks. Drawings inside. The face? The same face from East Berlin. But in the final page, a map was drawn. It was a perfect mirrored overlay of Bohemia, 1352. Cartagena, 1891. Boston, 1966. Kellner, 1873. At the center, a single point marked only, Room 0. That room does not exist on any map, but the Stasi's own black site logs suggest 1 more file was created, then immediately sealed. Spiegelkind 5. Not born, not dead, only reflected. I never believed in any of this. I was a teacher, rational, grounded. My husband was a structural engineer. We lived in Halifax, Nova Scotia. A quiet life. No religion. No magic. No madness. Until our daughter turned 4. That's when it started. At first, we thought it was gibberish, just a child playing with sounds. But then the recordings were analyzed. She wasn't speaking nonsense. She was speaking 4 languages, all simultaneously. Latin, Aramaic, Czech, Old Greek. Not just phonetically, fluently, but reversed. Each one mirrored like audio tape run backward. When asked what she was saying, she simply replied, "I'm not speaking. They are. I'm just echoing." She never moved her lips when she said this. One night, she woke up screaming, her eyes wide, her pupils spiral-shaped. She kept repeating, "The face is outside the glass again. Don't look in the bathroom." I checked, and I saw nothing. But the mirror, the steam on the mirror, didn't fade. It formed a handprint, then another, then 4, perfectly symmetrical, too high for a child, too narrow for an adult. After that night, she began to draw. Always the same place. A massive, circular room of mirrors, each reflecting something different. But they weren't reflections of her. They were reflections of different times. In one, she was a boy wearing suspenders. In another, a baby with wires coming out of her skull. In another, 4 infants in glass cradles, spinning in opposite directions. She called it the place where all mirrors bleed. We took her to specialists, psychiatrists, linguists, neurologists. No diagnosis, only fear. One linguist, an older Czech woman, turned pale when she heard the recordings. She told us, these aren't languages. They're memory dialects. She's not possessed. She's remembering from outside. That night, our daughter stood in front of the hallway mirror for over 6 minutes, perfectly still. Then she turned to us and whispered, "They're almost done remembering us. After that, we'll forget we were ever real." Then, for the first and only time, she drew something new a hand, reaching out a mirror. Its palm was branded with the symbol, circle plus, and beneath it for words, "We were never born." The next morning, she was gone. No signs of forced entry. No footprints. Only the mirror, shattered into 4 perfect pieces, each one reflecting a different sky. One blue, one gray, one filled with stars, and one pure black, save for a flickering spiral. July 8th, 1997, North Atlantic, 12,300 feet below sea level. The USS Thresher II, a classified American deep-sea research submarine, vanishes during a mission off the Azores. No emergency signal, no explosion, no debris. It's simply gone. But 7 months later, a French sonar drone, part of a routine transatlantic cable inspection, detects a strange rhythmic pulse, exactly 4 beats per 11 seconds, like a mechanical heartbeat. They trace it to a trench off the mid-Atlantic ridge. There, fused into the ocean floor, is the black box from the Thresher II. Not the vessel, just the black box, completely intact. It should have recorded weeks of data. Instead, there's only one file. No timestamp, no coordinates, no ambient sound. Just a 4-minute whisper looped endlessly. For identical voices, young, unplaceable, genderless, speaking in unnerving unison. We are beneath memory now. We do not breathe. We do not move. We only mirror. Then silence. Then, again, you called us myths. You called us mutations. But we are what you dream of when your face forgets itself. And then, the line that would later terrify the Pentagon's black site analysts. We were never inside the submarine. The submarine was inside us. At the end of the loop, a mechanical click, followed by a phrase whispered in reverse playback. When corrected, it reads, "Kellner protocol active. Phase 7 reached. Begin folding." The box had no battery, no known energy source. Yet the pulse still continues to this day. 1 beat every 2.75 seconds, as if something waits. Naval engineers ran a spectrogram of the whisper recording. In the waveform, when viewed as an image, they found something horrifying. A face spiraled and duplicated 4 times, each quadrant mirrored, each eye bearing the symbol. One technician attempted to remaster the audio, applying ancient harmonic algorithms to isolate individual voices. At 3:33 a.m., he texted his supervisor one sentence. "It's not a recording. It's a summoning." He hasn't spoken since. Only draws and ink. For infants. For hands. A mouth with no teeth. Only mirrors. The staff at Winder Pines assisted living new Sheriff Redmond as the quiet one. Didn't talk much. Didn't like music. Kept the blinds shut even on sunny days. Sometimes he'd murmur in his sleep, phrases no one understood. They're still backstage. Room 0 never had a door. For mouths don't need tongues. He was 91 now, the last living witness to what happened in Kellner, 1873. And no one believed a word he said. Until one rainy morning in late November, a new nurse was assigned to his wing. Pale, Black hair, unblinking. Her badge read T. Kellner. The head nurse didn't recall hiring her. No files, no background, but no one questioned it. Her presence felt inevitable. She sat by Redmond's bed and whispered, "Do you remember the theater?" His eyes widened. A tear rolled down his cheek, because no one alive should have known about the old Royal Theater, the one that burned down in 1874, the one no one ever rebuilt, the one that was never listed in any city record. Redmond couldn't speak, so he wrote, trembling hand, scratchy letters, on a napkin. Curtain never fell. She nodded. Good. Then you remember the song. She reached into her coat and removed something impossible, a wooden playbill, charred at the edges, dated December 17th, 1873. It read, "One night only. The four will speak. No audience necessary." She placed it on his lap. "They're rehearsing again. You'll hear them soon." Redmond tried to stand, to scream, but he couldn't move, because in the nurse's shadow he saw them, for small silhouettes, children, standing behind her, identical, expressionless. Their mouths were sewn shut, but in their eyes the spirals moved, and then she sang, for notes, no words, each one dissonant, but perfectly mirrored. Redmond's heart monitor flatlined, but his mouth kept moving. Even after his breath stopped, he whispered, "Curtains rising, not just in Kellner, everywhere." The nurse walked out and was never seen again. Security footage from that night, corrupted. Room 41B, now sealed. Only the playbill remained, when studied under UV light, for lines became visible. ACT I memory, ACT2 reflection, ACT3 multiplication, ACT4 absorption. The last line handwritten, no intermission. If you are reading this, it means the fourth gate has opened. This is not a warning. This is a mirror. Excerpt from the Kellner Codex, document 0x, for recovered beneath the Vatican Archives, 2012. Underscore. In 2021, a private think tank known only as Project Veil published a white paper titled Cognitive Fractures in Parallel Identicality, the Kellner Event. It was uploaded for 17 seconds before disappearing. Only one copy survived, archived by an AI web crawler trained to spot anomalous symmetry. The report compiles 30 fragments, collected over 150 years. Lost letters, medical anomalies, submarine black boxes, theater playbills, mirror etchings, EEG charts, and one final confession from a man who claimed to be the fifth Kellner. Born unfinished, the fragments all point to one idea. The Kellner quadruplets are not human. They are not aliens, not spirits, not biological flukes. They are conceptual invaders, entities that do not move through space. They move through recognition. They exist only when observed, and once observed, they begin to multiply, not in flesh, but in pattern, in the way your childhood photos shift slightly, in the way your dreams contain people you've never met but always recognize, in the way your reflection sometimes blinks wrong. Project Veil posits the Kellners are viral symmetries. Their true form is mathematical, encoded into the spiral symbol, circle plus, the forbidden spiral, the same one found inside Voyager's disk, in the mirror shards of room 41B, in the folds of the quantum submarine recording, and in the last thoughts of every twin who dies alone. They are unfolding us. Every time we try to study them, document them, speak of them, we manifest them. They're the idea for that are one that is mirrored, mirrors that are gates,